Hey, it's Roger, creator of the Azure Sandbox. I'm back, and in this video, we're going to pick up with our Azure MySQL Flexible Server configuration in the smoke testing section. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that all the DNS queries to our private endpoint for our MySQL database are working correctly. So to do that, what we're going to do is go log into our Windows Server jump box, jump win1, and we'll do some testing from there. So I'll go ahead and connect up using the Bastion, using my domain admin account. And we can grab the admin password from our key vault. And to do our DNS testing, we're going to need to know the fully qualified domain name of our Azure MySQL Flexible Server instance. So if I go into that portal blade, you can see here's the instance that we provisioned using Terraform. So if I click on that, you can find the fully qualified domain name for that instance here. And if we were connecting to it over the public internet, this would be the fully qualified domain name that would lead to a public endpoint. We're not using public endpoints, we're using private endpoints. So we need to make sure that we've configured our DNS to point to that private endpoint instead of the public endpoint. Okay, so we have that fully qualified domain name, and then we're going to switch back to jump win1, and I'm going to pull up PowerShell and see if DNS queries to that that domain name work. So we'll do a resolve DNS name. And I'll paste in that fully qualified domain name, mysql.database.azure.com, and the DNS query worked. And you can see that the reason why it worked is there's an A record pointing it to a different host name, which is the private.mysql.database.azure.com. And if you look at the IP address for that private endpoint, you could see it's sitting in that 10.2.3 subnet that we're expecting it to sit in, that delegated subnet. So that's good. And if you want to do a little bit more investigation on the DNS front, we could go pull up the DNS server, our private DNS server that we provisioned. And we can go look at the forward lookup zones here, and you can see there is no entry in here for that database.azure.com a record, right? So we didn't stick that in our private DNS server. We're getting that from Azure DNS. So how does that work? So if we go and look at the private DNS zones that we provisioned as part of the sandbox, you can see that we have one here for MySQL, private.mysql.database.azure.com. And when we click on that, we can see that the Azure MySQL Flexible Server instance has been registered here as an A record, and it's pointing to the private endpoint in my subnet, my delegated subnet. And we can also see that this private DNS zone is linked to both of our VNets, both VNet shared and VNet app. So that's what makes these DNS queries work. So I think the next thing we're going to try to do is actually connect to our test database, our test MySQL database, using that private endpoint. Okay, so normally MySQL Workbench would have been installed on this system. However, due to a bug in the package, the chocolatey package, it is not. It has not been installed in advance. That's a known issue, and it should be cleared up at some point in the near future. So in the interim, what we will do is install it ourselves. So we'll go up to dev.mysql.com/downloads/workbench. And here's the installer for MySQL Workbench 8.0.34. And we are installing for Windows. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and go to the download page. And we'll install. Let's go with the smaller of the two and see how we make out with that one. So we'll do a client-only install, which gives us this shell thing, this router thing, and MySQL Workbench. That sounds like the closest to what I want. Oh, and it did actually find that it's a 64-bit architecture. So it's just the installer that's 32-bit. So that's good. There we go. Got all three downloads. Not sure why those were failing, but looks like we have all the binaries we need. So we'll go ahead and click execute. Okay, the shell's installed. Now it's going to do this router tool. That looks like it's happening pretty quick. So all three of those client components are installed successfully. And I guess we got to do some configuration of this router thingy. So we'll just go with the defaults here. How about that? Okay. So we'll go ahead and launch MySQL Workbench after setup. And see if we can connect. Well, here's MySQL Workbench. And connect to database. We don't have a saved connection. So we're definitely not connecting to this IP address. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pump in that fully qualified domain name for our MySQL Flexible Server instance. And let's see what our smoke testing. We want to use Bootstrap admin as the login. And we'll set up the password here. Let's go get our password. We just keep reusing that same password for bootstrapping all of our services. So that's the admin password secret. I'll copy that. And we'll paste it in here. And we'll put in testdb as the default schema. Connect. And bing, we're in. Successful connection to our Azure MySQL Flexible Server instance and the test database instance through our private endpoint. So that was a success. And I think that's it for our smoke testing. So in the next video, we'll pick up and we'll do a code walkthrough of the configuration itself. Thanks, everybody.